right, guys. So last time we were here, we looked at Nasir, not Nasir, but we looked at the conditions that led to, the free officers in Nasir coming in. We looked at the British with the Suez Canal and all the control. We looked at the Israeli-Egyptian war and how that played a part in creating tension. World War One, World War Two, the politicians only caring about their own wealth. Um, and we had a brief introduction to basically who the free officers were. Now we're going to be looking at just a continuation of that and how the free officers basically take advantage of an opportunity that presents itself within all this chaos. So, violence and revolt is this next section that we're looking at. As things continue to look more and more unstable, violence starts to erupt, right? These protests are known as the popular struggle because this is basically the common people, the majority of the people, the working class and the poor make up, the workers, the students, the militants, all of them coming together to basically boot out the elites, the rich, and the British. The main target of this struggle was to basically protest the British. So Egyptians workers refused to work in British companies. They can't make any money unless their workers are working for them. Located in Egypt, and they attacked any British soldiers stationed in the area. Just straight up, boom, attacking them. On January 25th, news broke out of this encounter between the British troops and the Egyptians in the capital, Cairo. And so when the people of Cairo found out, they began to basically burn down buildings. 750 buildings were burnt down, as you can see. And the protest purposely targeted buildings that had anything that symbolized a relationship with the British. Um, this showed the weakness of the British government. I mean, sorry, the Egyptian government, because they were unable to stop any of this chaos. Pause if you need to. I'm moving on. So with the violence, this instability, there's no control, right? The prime minister and the king couldn't do anything. We already went over that last lecture. Um, the officers knew, the free officers, the ones that formed that movement out of the military, knew that this was their opportunity, right? So these people are basically people who are coming together to find a solution for the people of Egypt, and they must overthrow the king and the current government because they're not doing anything, right? And so they knew that they had to do it now because number one, when is there going to be this much chaos in the future, right? You can't guarantee that. And number two, they knew that the king wanted to arrest them, not personally, but in order for the king to arrest them because they were being disloyal against the government, against the king, right? So it's like it's either now or never because it's either now or they'll end up in jail or they'll end up like executed. So they do it. On the night of July 22nd, 1952, the free officers take over all the key posts. So that means airports, telephone exchanges, radio stations, all of the places that are used by the military or used by police stations or by the government is taken over. The movement itself was a secretive movement, but it was a big movement. They had about 3,000 soldiers coming in and 200 officers, police officers coming in and basically going against the national government and joining the free officers in doing this. And so they did this. Then that night they took over. They arrested all the royal senior officers who did not join their side. And once this was all done, basically the free officers got on the radio and they're like, hey, guess what? The people of Egypt are free. We won, right? And so you can say, wait, so the people of Egypt approved of this? They wanted this? Yes, right? And this is why. Go back if you were not done writing. The free officers' ability to take over with little bloodshed. There was some violence, but not to the extent that you would think, right? It literally took them one night and they're like, yeah, we're in charge now. That doesn't tend to happen, but it happened here. Why? Because they faced very little resistance. I told you guys, some people welcome these types of things and they welcome the authoritarian power being transferred from one group to this group, the free officers. Many people in Egypt welcomed this because young soldiers joined them because they were fed up with the country's inability and the weakness of the king. They saw the king as weak and the country as weak and only serving the interest of the rich. People felt like they were neglected by their government. There was no land reform. There was nothing being done to take care of these people and their needs. And so they felt like the free officers were ordinary people because they were. None of these people in the military ranks necessarily came from rich neighborhoods. Most of them were from poor neighborhoods. And so they felt like these ordinary officers would come in and fix Egypt because they knew the struggle, they knew what they were going through. And so they saw this opportunity to clean up Egypt and start over. And so, therefore, the free officers, this movement didn't really necessarily need to convince people. I mean, it just, it is what it is. You can see in the pictures, there's people celebrating at the bottom, and they loved it. They were happy. They're happy. They welcomed it. One thing we have to address is the ideology. It's really hard to pinpoint where the free officers stood ideologically. Okay, there was a lot of diversity within the movement. One thing's for sure is they were all committed to Egypt, and they were all committed to getting rid of foreign powers, controlling them. The foreign power being the British, right? So the thing is, the free officers were not represented by one single mindset. So it's not like they were like, oh yeah, we're communist, or like we're capitalist, or we're this or we're that, right? No, there was many different groups inside. So one of them being the Muslim Brotherhood. They were people who were dedicated to the religion of Islam and basically wanted to reestablish Egypt to follow reestablish dignity, pride, and independence in Egypt under the teachings of Islam, right? And then out of that, there's the Democratic Movement for National Liberation. Those were the communist groups who were mostly made up of workers and young people, students, and some of the officers in the military who identified as communists. What they wanted was to bring socioeconomic reform and social justice as well. So that was their main goal. And then the last group was the WAF Party. And although they existed before this chaos started, they basically were saying like, hey, we can just reform these things. We don't really have to change everything. We can just change a few things here and there and make it better. So these are three of the main groups you found within the free officers, so subgroups. They weren't the only groups, right? But they were the most popular with the most numbers, okay? And then last slide, go back if you need to, but okay, so the question is the army a legitimate institution to lead, right? Does it make sense to give authority to the army? Now, you might not think so, right? Because we did not grow up really necessarily under those conditions. But for these people, this made sense, right? The political instability of recent years of the king's apparent absence of authority made the idea attractive of having the military rule. Why? Because number one, an army is organized, disciplined, soldiers obey orders, and can establish authority. Meaning all of this chaos, all of these protests, all of these riots, the free officers should be able to come in and put an end to it. And, we're tired of it, right? The army in Egypt also represented the nation as a whole. Soldiers came from different regions of the country and society. Some of them came from like regular families, not rich, not poor, but just regular. And some of them came from working class. Some of them came from lower class, right? And so this connected the people with the military because, there's a lot of people in the military, a lot of people. And so they're seeing their families or their friends or their relatives in the military doing these things. And it's like their people. It's just like them, right? They know what they're going through because they went through it too. This is why the idea of the army running the nation was popular. Unlike the political elite and the king, who were disconnected from the needs of the people and more focused on their own wealth. So you see this transfer of authority. Again, going back to Engels, authority is being transferred from one group, the elites, the wealthy, and it was not abolished. They did not get rid of it once the free officers came in, right? Now authority belongs to the free officers and the people they represent. Now the next thing is we're going to see how that plays out. We don't know, right? Whether it worked out, whether the people finally got what they wanted, or was this all a hoax? Who knows? I mean, we'll see next. All right. So with that being said, that's it. I'll see you guys later. Bye.